When my daughter begged me to attend her wedding, I didn't understand why her voice sounded like she was asking for forgiveness instead of joy. She called me late one evening, her words tumbling over each other, breathless and strained. I was standing at my kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug, watching the last of the daylight fade through the window. The house was quiet in that familiar way it gets when you've lived alone long enough to stop noticing the silence. "Mom," she said, "please come, I need you there." I smiled without realizing it. "Of course I'll be there," I told her. "You don't have to beg me for that." She went quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet. This was heavy, loaded. I really need you," she repeated. Something about the way she said it made my chest tight, but I pushed the feeling aside. Weddings are emotional, brides get overwhelmed, mothers are supposed to steady them. I had no idea that by the time she called me, the wedding had already happened. Before everything broke open, my life was simple and steady. I raised my daughter Lily on my own after her father passed away when she was 12. We grew up together in a way that blurred the line between parent and child, not in responsibility but in closeness. It was always us against the world, late-night talks in her bedroom, pancakes for dinner when neither of us felt like cooking, inside jokes that didn't make sense to anyone else. She was bright, sensitive, the kind of girl who felt things deeply and carried other people's emotions like they were her own. When she met Aaron, I was cautious but hopeful. He was charming in a controlled way, polite, reserved, always watching the room. He shook my hand firmly the first time we met, held Lily a little too close, like he needed to remind everyone she belonged to him. I told myself I was imagining it. Mothers are supposed to welcome the people their children love, so I did. I smiled, I asked questions. I ignored the quiet discomfort that followed him into every room. After they got engaged, Lily changed in small ways. She stopped calling as often. When she did, her voice sounded careful, rehearsed. She stopped asking my opinion on things she used to run past me automatically: flowers, colors, dates. "He wants it simple," she'd say. I understood that. Weddings are expensive, complicated, everyone has opinions. Still, I noticed I never heard we anymore, only he. When I asked about invitations, she laughed nervously. "We're still figuring things out." I offered to help, she declined. I offered again, she changed the subject. I told myself this was normal, that letting go was part of being a mother, that I didn't want to be the kind of woman who hovered or interfered. But some nights, lying in bed, I felt like I was slowly being erased from a story I'd helped write. The first real warning came 2 weeks before the date she'd mentioned casually in passing. I called Lily one afternoon to confirm my flight. I'd finally gotten a location out of her, a small venue a few hours away. She hesitated when I brought it up. "Mom, maybe wait a bit before booking." "Why?" I asked gently. "Rooms fill up fast." She sighed. "Things are complicated." That word again. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. "I just want the day to be peaceful." "You don't need to protect me from anything," I said. Another pause. "I'll call you back," she said and hung up. I stared at my phone long after the screen went dark. The truth didn't come from her. It came from a photograph. A mutual friend posted it online without thinking twice, a soft focus picture of Lily in a simple white dress, standing beside Aaron, both of them smiling under a wooden arch wrapped in greenery. The date was stamped clearly at the bottom. 3 months earlier. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Lily used to do homework, and felt my hands start to shake. Married? My daughter was already married. And I hadn't been there. I called her immediately. She didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. The house felt too big, too empty. When she finally called back, her voice was trembling. "Mom," she said, "please don't be mad." Mad? That wasn't the word for what I felt. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. She started crying. "I wanted you there, I swear I did." Then why was I invited? She didn't answer right away. In the silence that followed, I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but deep enough to change the shape of everything. That was the moment I realized the wedding she was begging me to attend wasn't the real one. And whatever had happened, it had been decided without me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the ticking clock that had been on my wall since Lily was a child. Every sound felt louder than it should have been, like the house itself was trying to remind me how much of my life had been spent inside these walls, with her. By morning, my eyes burned and my chest felt tight, but my voice was calm when I called her again. "Come over," I said, "please." She arrived an hour later, shoulders hunched, eyes red. She didn't hug me when she walked in. She stood just inside the doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit." She did, folding her hands in her lap the way she used to when she was about to confess something as a child. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said before I could speak. "I know," I replied, "and I meant it, that was the worst part, but you did." Tears slid down her face. She wiped them away quickly, almost automatically, like she'd practiced doing that without anyone noticing. "Aaron thought it would be easier," she said. "Easier for who?" I asked. She hesitated. "For us." That word "us" felt different now, smaller, closed off. "He said weddings turn into performances," she continued, "that people interfere, that it would be better to do something private first, just the two of us." "And after?" I asked. She swallowed. "After, we'd have a celebration, something later, something easier." My hands clenched together. "And when were you planning to tell me you were already married?" Her shoulders shook. I didn't know how. I studied her face, the same nose she'd had since she was 5, the faint scar on her chin from when she fell off her bike. This was still my daughter, but there was a distance in her eyes I didn't recognize. "Did he tell you not to invite me?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Looking back, the signs had been there longer than I wanted to admit. Aaron always spoke for her when we were together. If I asked Lily a question, he answered it first. If she hesitated, he filled the silence. He never raised his voice, never said anything outright cruel, but he controlled the rhythm of every conversation like a conductor guiding an orchestra only he could hear. "She gets overwhelmed easily," he'd say, hand resting possessively on her back. "I help her decide." I told myself he was supportive. I told myself I was imagining the way Lily would glance at him before answering, as if checking for approval. "Mom," she said now, her voice barely above a whisper, "he said you'd make it about you." That sentence landed harder than anything else. I leaned back against the couch cushion, suddenly exhausted. "About me how?" "That you'd want opinions, that you'd ask questions, that you'd make me doubt things." I let out a slow breath. "And do you?" She hesitated again, longer this time. "Yes," she said. The word hung between us, fragile and honest. I nodded. "That's not sabotage, Lily, that's thinking." She wiped her face again. "He said if I loved him, I'd trust him." There it was. Love framed as obedience, trust framed as silence. I reached out and took her hand. It felt colder than usual. "Love doesn't ask you to erase the people who raised you," I said, "and it doesn't make you choose in secret." She squeezed my hand tightly, like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. The wedding she was now begging me to attend, the one she'd called me about, wasn't a wedding at all. It was a reception, a performance, a carefully controlled event designed to look like a beginning when the real beginning had already happened without me. "He wants it to look normal," she said. "He says people will ask questions if you're not there." I closed my eyes. "So now you need me," I said quietly, "not because you want me there, but because my absence would be noticed." She flinched. "That's not fair." "It's honest," I replied. The room filled with silence again, thick and uncomfortable. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires crunching against gravel. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw fear beneath the guilt. Not fear of me, fear of what would happen if she stepped out of line. "You don't have to decide everything today," I said finally, "but you do have to decide whether you want a marriage built on honesty or one built on hiding." She nodded, tears falling freely now. That evening, after she left, I sat alone at the kitchen table and stared at the photo on my phone again. My daughter in white, smiling, married. A moment I could never get back. I thought about all the times I'd imagined walking her down the aisle, not literally but in spirit, being there when she stepped into a new chapter, witnessing it, blessing it. Instead, I'd been erased. Not because I was cruel, not because I was controlling, but because my presence represented something inconvenient, a voice she trusted before him. The invitation arrived a week later. Cream-colored, elegant, carefully worded. No mention of the earlier ceremony, no acknowledgement of what I already knew. Just a request. A performance waiting for its audience. I placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of the choice in front of me. If I went, I'd be pretending. If I didn't, I'd be confirming everything he'd warned her about. And somewhere in between those two options was my daughter, still reaching for me, still unsure how to stand on her own. That night, I asked myself a question I'd never thought I'd have to ask. Was showing up worth the cost of being erased? I didn't answer the invitation right away. I left it on the kitchen table where the light from the window fell across it every morning. Some days I'd walk past it without stopping. Other days I'd pick it up, turn it over in my hands, and imagine how different it would feel if it were honest. Lily called twice that week. The first time she asked if I'd received it. Yes, I said. And, she asked, her voice tight. I'm thinking, I replied. The second time she sounded tired. Aaron keeps asking if you've RSVP'd. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't asking because he wanted me there, he was asking because my absence would be noticed. I agreed to meet Lily for lunch a few days later, away from the house, away from the familiar spaces where she'd grown up. We sat at a small cafe with chipped mugs and soft music playing overhead. She stirred her coffee endlessly, even after the sugar had dissolved. He's under a lot of stress, she said, not looking at me. I nodded. I imagine you are too. She shrugged. He just wants things to be calm. Calm for who? I asked. She looked up then, eyes flashing briefly before softening again. Why can't you just come and support me? The question hurt because I knew it came from fear, not manipulation. I want to support you, I said, but I won't pretend nothing happened. Her jaw tightened. So what do you want? An apology, a public announcement? I thought for a moment. I want honesty from you, not from him. She stared into her cup. He says you're trying to pull me back. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Back to what? To you, she said, to being dependent. I took a slow breath. Lily, loving your mother doesn't make you dependent, it makes you connected. She shook her head. He says every marriage needs boundaries. He's right, I said gently, but boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you choose when to open. She didn't respond. A few days later, I received a call from my sister. I saw Lily's pictures, she said carefully. Pictures, plural. The reception photos had started circulating online, engagement-style poses, carefully staged smiles. People were congratulating her, commenting on how beautiful everything looked. No one knew they were 3 months late. I didn't know what to say, my sister continued. I thought maybe you were there and just didn't want to be photographed. I closed my eyes. I was. There was a long pause on the line. Oh, she said softly. That was how the truth began to leak out, quietly, in pieces. People started asking questions, not accusing, just curious. When did they actually get married? Wasn't it supposed to be sooner? Why didn't I see any pictures of you there? Each question landed like a small stone in my chest. The night before the reception, Lily came over unexpectedly. She stood in the doorway, eyes rimmed red, clutching her phone in her hand. He's upset, she said immediately. I stepped aside to let her in. Sit down. She paced instead. People are talking. He says it's because you haven't said anything. I haven't said anything because there's nothing kind to say, I replied. She stopped packing and looked at me, really looked at me. Why can't you just lie for me? The desperation in her voice broke my heart. I stood and took her hands. Because lies don't protect you, I said softly. They trap you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He says if you come tomorrow and smile, everything will settle. And what do you want? I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. That silence told me more than words ever could. That night after she left, I made my decision. Not out of anger, not out of pride. Out of clarity. I texted Lily. I love you, I will always show up for you, but I won't participate in pretending I didn't matter. When you're ready to talk honestly, I'm here. She didn't reply. The reception went on without me. I didn't watch the live stream, I didn't scroll through photos. I took a long walk instead, letting the cool air steady me. Later, my phone buzzed with messages. Some kind, some confused, some quietly supportive. One message stood out. From Lily. He was angry, but I felt relieved. I sat down on a bench and read it again. Relieved. That word felt like the first crack in a door that had been shut too tightly for too long. A week later, Lily called me crying. Not in panic, not in guilt. In exhaustion. I don't know who I am anymore, she said. I feel like I disappeared. I closed my eyes, my own tears finally spilling over. You don't disappear because you love someone, I said. You disappear when someone asks you to. She came over that night and stayed late. We talked until the clock ticked past midnight, about the wedding, the secrecy, the pressure to keep things simple and private. I thought if I just went along with it, it would get easier, she admitted. Control doesn't loosen with time, I said gently. It tightens. She nodded slowly. For the first time in months, she didn't check her phone once. The truth didn't explode into the open. It unfolded. Quietly, inevitably. Family members began to piece things together. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into concern. Aaron noticed. He stopped coming around. Stopped calling me polite. Stopped pretending. And Lily, caught between the man she married and the mother she had nearly lost, finally began to ask herself the question I'd been holding back since the beginning. What did this marriage ask me to give up, and was it worth the cost? The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic confrontation, no slammed doors or raised voices that marked the moment Lily began to see things clearly. It happened the way erosion does, slowly, quietly, as truth wore down the edges of what she'd been told to accept. She started coming over more often, not announcing it, just showing up with tired eyes and a kind of restlessness she couldn't seem to shake. One evening, she sat at my kitchen table while I cooked, watching me chop onions the way she used to when she was younger. The smell filled the room, sharp and familiar. He doesn't like it when I come here, she said suddenly. I didn't turn around. What does he say? That you undermine him, she replied, that you make me question things. I set the knife down and looked at her, and do I? She hesitated, then quietly, yes. The honesty startled us both. But not in a bad way, she added quickly. I think more, I feel less rushed. I nodded. That's what thinking feels like when you've been discouraged from doing it. She picked at the edge of the table. He says marriage means being united. It does, I agreed, but unity isn't silence, it's two voices choosing each other, not one drowning the other out. She didn't respond, but I saw something shift behind her eyes. The tension between them became harder for her to ignore. Aaron started checking in more frequently. Where are you? When will you be home? Who are you with? The questions were never angry, just persistent, framed as concern. He worries, Lily said one afternoon, repeating his words like they were her own. Worry doesn't require surveillance, I replied. She laughed softly, then stopped. That doesn't sound right when you say it out loud. No, I said gently, it doesn't. The first public crack came at a family gathering, a small one, a cousin's birthday. I almost didn't go, but Lily asked me to. I don't want to go alone, she said. Aaron arrived late and stood apart, arms crossed, scanning the room. Conversations faltered when he approached. He corrected Lily when she spoke, answered questions directed at her. At one point, an aunt asked Lily how married life was treating her. Aaron laughed before she could speak. She's adjusting. Lily looked at him, then at me. I'm learning, she said carefully. The room went quiet for a beat too long. Aaron's jaw tightened. Later that evening, Lily pulled me aside. Did you see his face? I did, I said. He didn't like that. No, I replied, he didn't. She didn't sound afraid when she said it. She sounded observant. That night, she came home with me instead of him. She slept in her old room, surrounded by posters she'd never taken down and books she used to love. In the morning, I found her sitting on the bed, phone in her hands, staring at a string of messages. "He says I embarrassed him," she said, "that I'm letting people get into our marriage." I sat beside her. "You answered a question honestly." "He says honesty should be private." "Only when it threatens control," I said softly. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and nodded. The fallout wasn't loud. It was cold. Aaron stopped calling me by name, stopped acknowledging my presence when we crossed paths. When Lily didn't respond to his messages quickly enough, he accused her of pulling away. "You've changed," he told her, according to her. "Your mother's getting in your head." That sentence used to frighten her. Now it angered her. "She's not getting in my head," Lily said one evening, voice shaking. "She's reminding me who I was before you." That was the first time she told me she'd said no to him. The truth, once noticed, couldn't be unseen. Lily began pointing out moments she'd once brushed off, how he'd insisted on approving her dress, her words, her tone, how he'd framed his preferences as concern, his rules as protection. "I thought he was helping me," she said quietly, "but he was replacing my instincts with his." I reached for her hand. "That happens slowly," I said, "and it happens to good people." She cried then, not the panicked tears of someone afraid to lose everything, but the steady tears of someone grieving what she'd given up. The family noticed too. Questions became more direct, whispers became worry. No one confronted Aaron outright, but the room no longer bent around him. He felt it. He confronted Lily one night after she returned from my house. "Do you talk about me there?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. "Yes," she said finally, "when it matters." He stared at her. "You're choosing sides." "No," she replied, "I'm choosing myself." That was the moment the marriage shifted. Not because she left, but because she stopped shrinking. Aaron withdrew, became distant, cold. The charm faded when it stopped working. And Lily, standing in the space between what she'd been taught and what she was beginning to believe, started to understand something crucial. Love that demands your silence is not love. It's control wearing a soft voice. One evening, she stood in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug, and said, "I think I got married because I was afraid to lose him." I nodded, and now. She took a breath. "Now I'm afraid to lose myself." That fear, I knew, could save her. Lily didn't leave him right away. That's something people rarely understand when they hear stories like this. They expect a clean break, a dramatic exit, a single brave moment where everything changes at once. But real life doesn't work that way. Real life moves carefully, especially when fear and love are tangled together. She stayed, but she stayed differently. She began keeping small pieces of herself intact, things she'd slowly surrendered without noticing. She resumed her morning walks alone. She started journaling again, something she'd loved in college and quietly abandoned because Aaron said it was dwelling. She spoke her mind more often, even when her voice shook. And each time she did, the cost became clearer. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he withdrew. He punished her with silence, with disappointment, with the subtle suggestion that she was failing him. "I don't recognize you anymore," he told her one evening. She repeated the words to me later, sitting on my couch with her knees pulled to her chest. "That's supposed to scare you," I said gently. She nodded. "It used to." The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday. Lily called me from her car, parked somewhere unfamiliar. I could hear traffic in the background, the faint click of her turn signal still blinking. "I'm sitting outside a therapist's office," she said. "He doesn't know." I felt my throat tighten. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also steady." She went inside. When she came over that evening, her eyes were red, but her posture was different, straighter, more grounded. She said something that stuck, Lily told me. She asked what parts of myself I'd been asked to minimize to keep my marriage peaceful. I didn't interrupt. She said, "Peace that cost you your voice isn't peace, it's compliance." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. Aaron noticed the change almost immediately. He questioned the therapy, dismissed it, suggested they work things out privately. He told her she was airing their problems to outsiders. She asked me if I feel safe disagreeing with you, Lily told him one night. He laughed. Of course you're safe, you're just confused. That laugh, the one that brushed off her reality, was the moment something hardened inside her. I'm not confused, she said, I'm finally clear. The distance between them widened. He stayed later at work. She stopped explaining herself. They began living parallel lives in the same space, the tension humming just beneath the surface. One evening, Lily came to my house with a small overnight bag. I need a break, she said. I didn't ask how long, I just nodded and hugged her. She slept deeply that night, the way people do when their bodies finally believe they're safe. The separation wasn't announced. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Erin told people she was taking time. Lily told the truth when asked, I'm figuring out who I am. Some family members were shocked, others weren't surprised at all. He always seemed intense, one aunt said carefully. Lily smiled sadly. I thought that meant passionate. Months passed. Lily continued therapy, continued asking hard questions, continued reclaiming parts of herself she'd folded away to fit inside someone else's expectations. One afternoon, we sat together on my porch, the air warm and still. I think I rushed into the marriage because I didn't trust myself to stand alone, she said. I nodded. That doesn't make you weak. She smiled faintly. No, it makes me human. Erin reached out a few times, apologies layered with conditions, promises that sounded familiar. He wanted things to go back to the way they were. But Lily had changed. And once you see the cost of shrinking, it's hard to agree to do it again. I told him I need more than love, she said. I need respect, I need space, I need honesty. And, I asked. He said I was asking too much. I met her eyes. Then you're asking the right person. She laughed softly, the sound lighter than I'd heard in a long time. The divorce, when it came, wasn't vicious. It was sad, quiet, heavy with grief for what might have been, but also threaded with relief. Lily mourned the dream she'd let go of, the version of herself who believed love meant endurance. But she didn't mourn her voice. She was done losing that. One evening, long after the paperwork was signed, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once done homework, the same one where I'd stared at wedding photos I wasn't meant to see. I'm sorry I didn't invite you, she said suddenly. I reached for her hand. I know. I thought I was protecting myself, she continued, but I was really protecting his comfort. I squeezed her fingers. You don't have to carry that alone anymore. She smiled through tears. I won't. What I learned through all of this, what I wish every mother and daughter could hear, is this. Love should expand you, not isolate you. Marriage should add to your life, not subtract the people who helped build you. And any relationship that requires secrecy from those who love you is already asking too much. I lost the wedding I thought I'd attend. But I didn't lose my daughter. In the end, I gained her back, stronger, clearer, and finally standing in her own truth. There are moments in life that don't look like endings, but change everything anyway. I used to believe that missing my daughter's wedding would always be the deepest ache of my life, that being left out of such a sacred moment meant I had failed her somehow, as a mother, as her safe place. But what I learned is this. Sometimes love doesn't look like being present for the celebration. Sometimes it looks like being willing to step back so the truth can step forward. I couldn't stop my daughter from making her choices, and I couldn't protect her from every mistake. What I could do, what mattered most, was remain a place she could return to without fear or shame. Love that demands silence is not love. And marriage that asks you to erase your past, your family, or your voice will always come at too high a cost. If you're listening to this and you feel yourself shrinking inside a relationship, if you're being asked to keep secrets from the people who love you most, please hear me when I say this. Your voice is not the problem. It never was. So I'll leave you with this question. If love required you to disappear, would you still call it love? If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more real, emotional stories about family, betrayal, healing, and finding your way back to yourself, please like this video and subscribe. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sitting with this story.